Hi guys, Adam here. So in this video, we're going to apply some text logic here that tells us what we're comparing our information in our readiness and training load to. And this is important because there are a lot of different ways that we can divvy up our comparisons. This is really dynamic. Let's go through each of the ways. The first is if we have 0 past X number of days and we're comparing to oneself, then we are comparing Popeye the Sailor, or whoever we select, their data on this date, that's what's here and here. We're comparing that data to their own average over their entire presence in the data set, which could be the season, it could be multiple seasons, whatever you decide. So this is Popeye the Sailor's readiness score today on 11/20, and this is his average over the year. Now, if we type in a past X number of days, let's say 7, now we're comparing Popeye the Sailor's data on this day, 11/20, versus his average over the past 7 days. So that's already, we have 2 comparisons. Now, let's make past X days blank again and change our comparison to team. Now we're comparing Popeye the Sailor's value on this date to the team average on this date. If I select position, we are comparing Popeye the Sailor's data on this date versus the position average on this date. So the average for the center position on this date. If I type in a past X number of days, now we are comparing Popeye the Sailor's data on this date, 11/20, versus the position average readiness score over the past 7 days. If I change this to team, now we're comparing Popeye the Sailor's data on this date versus the team average over the past 7 days. That is 6 different scenarios, depending on how we manipulate this information, which could change at any time. I think it's important to display what we're comparing somewhere on this page for our own clarity and for the clarity of others if we're going to print off this report. So to do that, we need to identify all the different scenarios, and we just did. So let's put them here. I created a space. What I did is I copied this, pasted it here, and I changed this to text logic. And we're going to identify each of the scenarios and whether or not each is true based on our criteria, and then identify the one that is true and relay it here so that everyone knows what's going on. So I'm going to type verse own average. That was the first one. Verse team day average. Verse position day average. Verse own average over X days versus team average over X days versus position average over X days. Okay, these are our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 scenarios. Now we need to identify which one is true and tell Excel what we want to display if it is true. So I'm going to start off with the own average, and that's if and equals if and. The first thing that has to be true is this, and it gives A9 to I9, but you don't need this, and it actually makes it not work. So let's erase the I9 and put $signs around the A and the 9. That's essentially saying this cell. If that cell is less than 1, which would mean that it's blank, essentially, and comma, this cell, again, I'm going to erase the I don't want it, and this cell is equal to reference self, or whatever we type in here. We might type that in player, and then our formula, everything will update appropriately. So if that equals A2, if those two things are true, close it off. Then to start off, we're going to say quote VS dot own average, end quote, close the parenthesis, click enter. Now right now that says false. Let's check. Yeah, it is false. This has to be self, and this has to be blank or less than 1. Now, if I go back to my reference, now it says verse own average. However, I think that we can make this a little bit more clear. And what we can do is we can say, if those things are true, then before this verse own average, I'm going to go to DataVis, and I'm going to click on this cell, and I'm going to erase the 2I4. And I'm going to lock that in. And I'm going to do an ampersand, which is and. I'm going to put a space before the verse so that there's space between the person's name, because that's what I'm calling for here, and verse own average. I'm going to say verse own season average. And I'm going to click enter. Now it says verse the person's name who I'm on, or that name verse their own season average. Now what I can do is I'm going to copy this formula. We have the framework worked out, and I'm going to paste it down here. Now, to get the team versus the team day average, actually, let's change this. Let's make this even more specific. Why not? You can always remove things. So Popeye the Sailor versus own season average. How about Popeye the Sailor and I'm going to go on, or space on. So I did the name cell, the cell where the name resides, ampersand, quote, space on, quote, and go DataVis, this date here, and I'm going to lock in A6. I'm going to remove I6. I'm going to say, and versus own season average. These ands are just separating the arguments. Okay, so I'm saying I want the name and then the word on with a space and another space, and then the date, and then I want versus own season average. I'm going to click enter. Now we're getting closer. So Excel automatically displays the date as a date code. The way that we get around this is after this ampersand where we're calling for the date, we're going to type in TEXT, open parenthesis. Now this is the value, that cell is the value that we want, and I'm going to do comma, and it's asking us how we want to format that value. I'm going to do quote MM\DD, end quote, and close the parenthesis. Now I'm saying the exact same thing, but all I'm doing is I'm formatting that code into a date that makes sense to me. I'm going to click enter. So now we're clear. We are comparing Popeye the Sailor on 11/20 versus his own season average. And that'll be reflective of the date that we select. It's just reiterating it. So now let's copy this and let's paste it down. And now a really simple thing that we can do here is we can just change own season average to team day average. And we can copy this down here, paste it, and we can say position day average. Okay, so we have 3 different scenarios identified based on what we select. However, not all 3 of these things are true. We just need to make a slight manipulation to each of these. Instead of looking at reference A2, which is self, so right now, this is on self, and we're looking at that because that is what is in reference A2. We need to change them to A3 and A4 to look at the team and the position selections. So for the team, instead of reference A2, make it A3, and we'll see false. And for here, for the position, instead of A3, we're going to look at A4, which we'll see is the position right here. And let's click enter, and we'll see false. However, if I go in here and I change this to team, I go to my reference, now the first one is false, but this one is true. Okay, I hope that makes sense so far. Now we're going to get a little bit nuts. Okay, So bear with me here, because we want to be specific, or I want to be specific, and maybe you won't want to be as specific, but I like to do it this way. So I'm going to copy this, paste it down here. Now we're comparing Popeye the Sailor to his average over a specified number of days. And we can identify what those days are because we're smart people. So now, first of all, this has to be not less than 1. This has to be greater than or equal to 1 now. So if the DataVis, if the past number of days we select is greater than or equal to 1, and the name and our selection criteria is equal to self, essentially, we want to do the same thing. Popeye the Sailor on this date, that never changes. We're always comparing that to something else. We can say versus, and then we can say own average between space, and now we're going to add some more stuff at the end of this quote. So we're looking at Popeye the Sailor, his data on a date versus his own average between, that's text in quotes, and what a date of is this date. All right, it comes up here. I'm going to remove this and make A6, lock it in. That date minus 7. Oh, whoops, not minus 7, my fault. This date minus whatever is in this cell, whatever number is in this cell. Let me drag this, make it bigger. And I'm going to remove the I9. I keep on doing it. I just want to keep it to the A's. Doesn't matter. So whatever this is minus, or whatever the date is minus however many days that is, between this, and I'm going to do and quote dash or space and space quote ampersand this date, and I'm going to take a break here, and we're going to change some things to text, but this is what I have so far, and I'm going to click enter. It's false, but let's make it true so we know what's going on. For this to be true, we need to set the comparison to self, and we need to have some number of days selected. So let's put this to 7. Let's put this to self. This is self. Now when we go to reference, Popeye Sailor on 11/20 versus own average between those two dates, which are not real dates. And I'm going to do ampersand at the end, quote, space, open parenthesis, past, space, quote, ampersand. This is getting real. I know it's getting convoluted, but stay with me here. Look at this formula, type it in exactly. Past, and now we're going to take this here, okay? This DataVis A9. Or you can select the cell again that has the X number of days that you're supposed to type into it. And that, and for ampersand, quote, days, close the parenthesis, close the parenthesis, put another quote, and click enter. So now we're being even more specific. Popeye the Sailor on 11/20 versus own average between those two dates, and in brackets, the past 7 days. That's pretty clear. Now, the last thing that we have to do to make this formula work is after the ampersands here, here and here, where we have dates, we just need to make them text like we did here. So after this ampersand, I'm going to type in text, open parenthesis, and it's that date minus that number of days. Before this ampersand, right here, I'm going to do comma, and you're going to see here it says format text. because we're in the text formula right now. Quote MM/BD, end quote, close the parenthesis. Then we're going to do the same thing here. Right after this ampersand, type in text in all caps, open parenthesis, after the A6, comma, quote, MM/BD, quote, close the parenthesis. All we've done now is we've formatted those two date codes into month, day, dates. I'll click enter. So now we're going to see Popeye the Sailor on 11/20 versus own average between 11/13 and 11/20, or the past 7 days. Now I'm going to copy this and paste it down if we're happy with this. And I would make sure, like within each of these frameworks, you're happy with what you've done, so you can copy and paste it and then work from there because it's easier. All we have to do now is change this from reference A2 to reference A3, which is team. If that appears in our dropdown, then instead of own average, we can say team average and click enter. It's false, but let's make it true just so that we can see. That's if this is team and this has a number of days. And now we'll notice it changes to team average over those number of days. Now I'm going to copy this, paste it down, and all I'm going to do is change reference A3 to reference A4, which is position, and change team to position. And you can format this, word it any way you want, but the concept still applies where now we have these we have these 6 conditions. One of them is true, and we need to identify the one that is true, and we'll display it in our DataVis. Now, in this cell right over here next to it, I'm going to do a simple formula because it makes things easier. You can get this information across without doing anything, but this makes it a lot easier and a lot more simple for me. I'm going to do equals if this equals false, comma, 0. So if that's false, I want 0. If it's not, comma, I want 1. I'm going to close the parenthesis. And then I'm going to drag this formula down. And notice we have 1, 1, and everything else is 0 because only one of these conditions is true. And ideally, so now in every scenario, one of these conditions should be true, and we want that thing, whatever is true, to display in our DataVis. Now, I'm going to do an index match formula, which we've done before, to display which one is true. Equals index. I could do that here, or I could do it in our DataVis. I prefer to do it here and then transfer it over, but it doesn't really matter. So equals index. What do I want? I want whatever's in here, comma, when I match, open parenthesis. Well, what am I matching? I'm matching the value 1 to, what am I matching the value 1 to? Whatever's in here. And what this is saying is wherever there's a 1 in here, whatever's next to it is going to appear here. And I'm going to do comma 0, an exact match, to close parentheses, click enter, and there we go. The team average between those dates has a 1 next to it. That's what's appearing here. Now, the last and final step here is if we go to DataVis, maybe I'll merge and, I don't know, maybe I'll merge and center these for now. I go equals in this cell, go to my reference, click on this, and click enter. It looks ugly, but let's wrap it up. Let's maybe put it in the middle. Let's make this size 14 and maybe make it tilted. Let's even make it bigger maybe so that we actually know what's going on. Or maybe we don't tilt it, because it's harder to read. And we can bold it or whatever. I mean, I'm just going to keep it like that. So, and maybe I'll put it in blue to match the color. Now we know we're comparing Popeye the Sailor on 11/20 versus his team average between 11/13 and 11/20, which is the past 7 days. And if I change this to 14, what's going to happen? Now we're comparing them between 11/6 and 11/20, or the team average between those dates, or the past 14 days. If I change this to position, the numbers change. We're comparing them to the position average. If I change this date, let's say go up a week, the dates are changing. If I remove this, now we know we're comparing him on 11/27 to the position day average. So that was a lot of work to get a pretty simple thing done, but it's pretty dynamic and pretty cool, in my opinion. So I hope you got something out of this video. To me, this is really helpful, especially with how dynamic our dashboard is. So let me know if you have any questions. I know these formulae are pretty tough. I might just kind of leave it on one for a second here so you can take a look at it and take a screenshot or whatever you need to do. And yeah, and I'll catch you in the next video. We're going to go over a cool injury highlighting type of graph in the next video, that I think is really, really awesome. So I hope you guys had fun. Good work, and I'll see you in the next one.